Here, Remembrance Sunday events have been held across the country to pay respects to members of the British and Commonwealth Armed Forces who have died in wars. In London, the Queen led the annual service of commemoration, which took place at the Cenotaph in Whitehall. The bells toll for Remembrance Sunday. Thousands gathered at the Cenotaph in central London, at war memorials across the country and beyond, to lay wreaths and pay their respects to those who have died in Britain's armed forces. The Queen, as is tradition, laid the first wreath at the Cenotaph, followed by senior royals and then the Prime Minister. With the occupation of Afghanistan still claiming lives, 437 at the last count, Remembrance Sunday was observed there too, by more than 9,000 soldiers and armed forces still in the country. Closer to home in Northern Ireland, Dublin's Prime Minister, Enda Kelly, was at Enniskillen 25 years after the IRA bombing which killed 12 and served as a significant turning point in the history of the Troubles. It is 94 years since the armistice which ended the First World War, the 11th of November, a solemn reminder for those who paid and continue to pay with their lives for serving in our armed forces. And they are, of course, found in almost every town and village across the country. But whilst the nation's war memorials record those who've given their lives, how those men and women came to die is all too often forgotten. Now, though, a new book has unearthed the stories behind the names on a war memorial in Devon, a snapshot of sacrifice from one small village, as Fatima Manji reports.
These are the dramatic images of war, evocative of millions of men in action, fighting for king and country. They show the glory, yet hide the misery. The stories of men whose names we don't know, sent over the top, never to return. In so many places still, there remains an enduring image of war. Less dramatic, often unnoticed, the humble war memorial.
During the First World War, those who died were not returned home to their families. At the time, war memorials began popping up in towns and villages across the country, a sort of shrine to immortalise those who had fallen. All this at a time when people genuinely believed this was the war, to end all wars.
It ended the hopes and lives of the young. Among them Archie Huggins, who lived in the village of Lidford in Devon. Here he was known as an athletic young man who loved cricket and football. Yet just 3 weeks after landing at Gallipoli in 1915, he met his death, after battling not with the enemy, but with disease. He had been living in a trench strewn with unburied bodies. His great-nephew still lives in the family village, and only recently discovered Archie's story.
It was never ever talked about. So with my grandfather, my father, never really talked about them at all. So whether it hurt them so much, they weren't able to talk about him, because I've talked to all the relations that are still alive, and none of them know anything about him.
Lidford had always tried to remember the sacrifice of the fallen, but as years passed, few knew what had really happened to them, until an author decided to trace the story of every name listed on the memorial, believing so much history could be lost.
If you read a diary which has been in somebody's waistcoat pocket whilst they were fighting in the trenches, written, scribbled whilst they had a moment to put down their immediate thoughts, that makes it very, very real to you. And so I did feel that was very immediate. But I think the war memorial is like a great public document, and we've forgotten the way of reading them.
And more sons of the town have become casualties of war. More names for the memorial. Among them, 19-year-old Private Andrew Kelly, killed near Basra in Iraq. At the time of his death, his father wrote to Tony Blair, asking him if he would have taken the country to war had his own son been in the army. And Lieutenant Nick Taylor, the first British death of the Falklands War.
This is one of the few casualties which is not disputed. The wreckage
He was
of the
killed when his
shot
Harrier
down
was
near
shot
Goose
down.
Green. An Argentine military chaplain gave the Harrier's pilot, Flight Lieutenant Nicholas Taylor, a short funeral service.
What does it mean to have your brother included on a memorial like this?
I think it's very important, as a family, because it means that people did understand what he died for and that it was important what he died for, but also for generations to come. He's not just a name.
Not just a name. These are the places that are in some way comforting to the loved ones left behind. But perhaps they also serve as an uncomfortable reminder to society in pointing out the real cost of war.
Lidford in Devon, one village's story of sacrifice.